Hello and welcome to another pen video from me, Penultimate Dave. So I've had a number of requests from people both in the London Fountain Pen Club and also the UK South Fountain Pen Club, and also requests from people online on how to remove nibs. A lot of people were scared to do it, and I must admit I was scared to start with. So it's just something that I've got used to doing with some of my nibs, and I thought I would show you here today. A lot of people do this. A lot of people will take nibs out to clean pens, to replace nibs, or even to swap nibs between different manufacturer pens. If they have a pen that they don't like how it writes, but they have a nib that writes well, then maybe they'll try and mix and match to get that better writing pen. So I thought I would start off really. This is one of my Viscontis, the Homo sapiens Florentine Hills, and the Visconti nib units are screw-in nib units. Now you can get a tool, either a Visconti specific tool which is not actually sold to customers, or it's only sold or given to retailers, or you can get an aftermarket tool. In most cases, you can unscrew the nib here if you're very careful, and I'll just show you here how easy that was. Now, not all of my Viscontis will unscrew like this. Some of them, the nibs are pretty much almost like glued in place. They're probably not glued in, but they're just such a tight fit. So there you have it. So this is a screw-in nib unit, and this is a 23 cat palladium medium nib, a Dream Touch nib. You could get the nib and feed out of this nib collar. Now, what I should actually say is, when you're doing something like this, you really are voiding the warranty, and you're taking this into your own hands. You can damage the nib collars. The nib collars can crack or split. You can also mesh the fins, and you could end up with a pen that just doesn't work. So you have to bear that in mind. But for me, I've been doing this for some time now, so I am quite used to this. So normally the first thing that I will do is, with a Visconti, is I will try and unscrew the nib before I even ink it up, just to see if the nib unscrews. Sometimes ink can actually make the nib unit very tight and almost like glued in place, especially if you have a high concentrated dye ink, like a high sheening ink. That can have that effect. Now I have some other pens here as well. So this is a Leonardo Officina Italiana, and this was one of my original nibs. If you watched my Leonardo video, you'll recall that I had Baby's Bottom on a couple of nibs. This is one of the original nibs, but this is the nib unit here. And I've mentioned before that these are not screw-in nib units. And again, these are friction fit nibs. So what you can do here, you just have to be very careful with fins, because fins can bend. They can be quite pliable, but you just grip and pull it out, and there you have the nib and the feed, and then the section there. So that's another one that I can remove. Now, so what I thought I would do, if I just put this back into place, just line this up. Now, what you'll find is that sometimes when you try to push it in, you cannot get the nib in easily. So normally these are keyed in place, so you just have to find the right key, make sure the feed is lined up there against the nib, and then you're done. So let's move along to a Jinhao. This is a Jinhao X450, and what you should always do is remove the converters first. And now these nib units are not screwed into place; these are friction fit, and you've got to be careful of those fins. And then you just pull, and there you have it. The nib and the feed come out. So that's the Jinhao. That's the Leonardo. Now, we have some other screw-in nib units here. So this is an Opus 88, and this is a Yovo nib, and it's a broad nib. Now, this has a screw-in nib collar. So, and you also have a little O-ring there that you don't want to lose. So what I normally find is if you want to get it out of that nib collar, your best bet is to either screw it in partially or screw it in fully. And again, then just pull it out, and there you have it. So you now have a Yovo nib out. And really the reason why I was doing this is I have these Pen BBS pens, and these are lovely pens, but as with all Chinese pens, they come with a fine nib, and I really am not a fan of fine nibs. I find them quite scratchy, especially steel nibs. So what I'm going to do here, these Pen BBSs, now you can see here, I've already meshed the fins a little bit already here. So you have to be very careful with certainly the Pen BBS ones. But here you have a clear nib collar. Now your best bet here with the Pen BBS ones is to grip on the shoulders of the nib and just pull it out that way. You have you can still squish the fins, but it's a lot easier to do that way. So I now have obviously a number of pens disassembled here. So I really do like this acrylic on the Pen BBS pens, but I hate the nib. So one thing that I could do is take the Yovo broad nib here and see if I can try and put this into the nib collar here on the pen. Now you'll see here, this is the Pen BBS nib collar, and it's a little bit too narrow. And the reason for this, and I'll show you, is that the feed is very different in terms of the size in the diameter on the Pen BBS compared to a lot of other pens. So what you can do is just take the nib and put it on the Pen BBS feed, and then push that in, and then now I actually have a lovely Yovo broad nib on a Pen BBS. And this will make my day, because it will now mean that I am going to use this pen a lot more because it has a broader nib on it. Now, the other thing I can do as well, let's take this off. If I unscrew it again, now I've just meshed those fins again, because these fins are very, very fine. So if I put that Yovo nib back, now one thing you can do is you can just take an X-Acto knife or a craft knife and just straighten those fins up a little bit. You don't want to obviously snap the fins, but that's something that you can do if the fins do bend and you're concerned about that. So what I will do is I'll take a Jinhao X450 nib and I'll put that on there, and I'll do the same. I'll put it back with the Pen BBS feed and the Pen BBS nib collar, and I will screw it in place, and then I now have a Jinhao X450 nib on my Pen BBS pen. And again, I'm going to be more likely to use this pen now that it's got a Jinhao X450 nib on it. So, and it's because the Jinhao X450 nibs are a medium nib. I love the Yovo broad nibs, and it just makes it a so much nicer pen to write with. Now, the other thing I can do is I took this Leonardo nib out earlier. Now, this is friction fit, so let me pull that out. And then I'm going to do the same, because of this feed, I'm going to take the Pen BBS feed and line the nib up to the feed as much as I can. Try and do this. It's a little bit hard doing this on camera. And then put the nib collar back on in place. And then, again, I will screw this back on. And now I actually have a Leonardo Bock nib on my Pen BBS pen. And this is a very broad nib. So it's very easy to do this. It's not that difficult. If you're going to try it, you have to bear in mind that you will void your warranty. Don't do this on expensive pens. Practice first on very cheap pens or pens that you do not worry about messing up. But it is very easy to do. So now, like, I can have a Bock nib, a broad Bock nib, and this is a steel nib, it's not a gold nib. But I could put a gold nib on there if I wanted to. I can have a Jinhao X450 nib on here. I can have a Yovo broad nib on this Pen BBS. And for me, this is so much better than this fine nib from Pen BBS. And so I really do love these Pen BBS. This is the Hawaiian gradient colour acrylic, and they are really lovely material. But I absolutely hate the nibs. And for me, this is the best way of making a pen write better and become more favourable and more usable in your collection. Now, is it a Franken pen? Yeah, kind of, because you're swapping nibs out amongst pens. People do this all the time. People do this with Franklin Christoph nibs. They'll put them in other pens. They'll do it with Yovo nibs and Bock nibs. So, like, it is something that people do, but it's really down to you. It's your pen. Now, if you're going to go and sell it later on, then obviously you do have to be more careful with that, and obviously make the buyer aware if you're going to sell it like that. But this is an easy way of just being able to swap nibs out. So, like, if I remove this once more, and then I am going to unscrew again. Actually, that one actually just went straight in without unscrewing. Now, if I put that nib back, and I'm going to put the Pen BBS nib back on this pen, and then just put it back in there. And that's it. That's all you have to do. Now, one thing that I will show you, the reason why you do have to remove the converters is when you have a converter pushed onto... Sorry, I've got my wrong converter there. When you have a converter pushed onto the back of the pen, it's going onto the post on the back of the feed. So you do need to remove the converter, because if you don't, it will be very difficult to get that nib out. But once you do that, it's perfectly fine. So let me just screw that back into place, like so. Just rearrange those fins a bit more. Put the converter back on. And you can just see how easy it is to change nibs. So that's my Pen BBS put back together again. And we'll do the Yovo nib on the Opus 88. And you could do this if you just want to clean nibs and not just swap nibs around. Now, again, I mentioned earlier on about these nibs or feeds are normally keyed in a certain way. Like, I can't fit this in, so you do just have to find the correct orientation. Now, sometimes you can see it well on, there's like a little key here, and there you go. That's in place now. So that's my Opus 88 done as well. And obviously there's a little bit of water here from the inky water from the feed. And then I have my Leonardo Bock nib, Leonardo Officina, and there you go, that's in there. And then we have this Jinhao X450 nib, so I'll just line that feed up again, and because it's a friction fit, I will try and get this in. No, not got that in the right way. There you go. And there it is. So that's my Jinhao X450. Put back together again now. So you can do this if you just want to clean the nib and feed thoroughly. Like some people want to do that on a regular basis. I personally wouldn't recommend doing it on a regular basis because it really will weaken the feed and the fins if you're not careful. You're more liable to snap the feeds and that, but or even the fins. But there you go. That's how easy it is to remove friction fit nibs and to be able to also swap nibs between pens. So now I can have the Leonardo Bock nib on a Pen BBS, I can have a Jinhao nib on the Pen BBS, or I can have an Opus 88 Yovo nib on a Pen BBS. So that's how simple it is. So thanks for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe. Don't blame me if you mess up your pen. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.